Well, hello and good evening. Welcome to another live Q&A session with the NIC and Alexa. My name's Sam Donaghy, the team leader from the technical helpline. I'm joined tonight by my colleague Lee Hancock from the area engineering team. Good evening, Lee.
Evening, Sam.
How are you this evening?
Not bad, yourself?
Yeah, pretty good. I suppose for a Monday, as they say. How's things been going in your part of the world? Are we sort of seeing things fully return from lockdown, or are we still in a bit of transition?
Yeah.
What's it like?
Pretty much, I think we're getting there slowly. Contractors, the majority are extremely busy. I think a lot of guys have got backlogs of work where they've been putting it on the back burner, if you like, till there's a little bit of normality brought back to us. But yeah, everything's getting there nicely.
Yeah, I think we're sort of seeing that echoed on the helpline in that everybody seems to be busy and back sort of in full productivity. If I'm honest, the number of calls to the helpline is a little bit low than what we would expect under normal circumstances, but perhaps I think what we're finding internally is the holiday season's been extended so much because people didn't take holidays in the early part of the year, so there's a lot more. So maybe that accounts for some of the little bit of quietness that we're experiencing on the helpline. But it's good to see that things are getting back into the swing of things. Well, we'll kick off with our question of the week that we posed. So just to remind everybody, we actually posted out through the social media channels a little bit of a symbol question for this week. So we posed the symbol and asked people, what does that symbol represent? Does it mean that it's a luminaire that can't be used outside? Does it mean it's a luminaire not suitable for direct mounting on a flammable surface? Is it a luminaire not designed for bowl mirror lamps, or is it a luminaire not suitable for covering with thermal insulating material? So what was the correct answer, Lee?
We're looking at the final one, Sam. It's a luminaire that cannot be covered with thermal insulation.
Yeah, absolutely. And if people wanted to know whereabouts that was, have we got some pointers that we can show them? Because there is a table of commonly used symbols associated with luminaires.
Yeah, table 55 if memory serves.
Yep, I think it's certainly in chapter 55. Let's just pull that up, shall we? So yeah, it's table 55.3. It's on an easy page to remember. So it's on page 222 of 7671. And you'll see there's a set of symbols there to help us. This is one that we quite often get people concerned about, especially when they're up in the loft area of domestic properties, and they find that months or perhaps even years after the electrical installation's been completed, the homeowner's decided to have some insulation, and the insulation's placed nice and thickly right over all of the electrical installation, and so obviously that can be detrimental, and it can obviously cause a concern unless we're seeing that symbol. Well, no, especially if we're seeing that symbol that says it's not suitable. So if we had it without the cross, then it would be okay, and it would be a luminaire designed so that you actually could cover it in thermal insulation without it being detrimental. Okay, so we're off and running. Some other questions that we've had come in. Nice one, a common one that we get on the technical helpline. Can I install 230 volt light fittings in the zones of a bathroom? What's your thoughts on that one, Lee?
Absolutely. I mean, there's a few things we need to consider. I mean, first and foremost, IP ratings. The minimum IP rating for Zone 1 is IPX4, and if there's the possibility we're going to have jets of water aiming towards the fitting, IPX5. One thing we must consider is the manufacturer's instructions. Are they going to permit us to fit that luminaire or that device in that location? So there's a few things to bear in mind there.
Yeah, absolutely spot on, because there's a little list, isn't there, of acceptable current using equipment, and luminaires appear in that list. But as you rightly said, we've got to tick those other two boxes, make sure it's the right IP rating, and get confirmation in the form of manufacturer's instructions that it is a fitting suitable for the zones of the bathroom. So yes, if we can tick those two boxes, we're fine. Slightly off piece, strange one. But I think it's a good question worth talking about. Can I use the protective measure of placing out of reach in industrial installations? So I think we're all used to ADS, and that's our most commonly used protective measure. But can we use placing out of reach when it comes to industrial installations? Lee?
We can. We need to consider fault protection as well as basic protection. If we're going to place something out of reach, that's going to tick the box of basic protection. We've also got to look at the environment as well, and is it under controlled supervision of skilled people? That could obviously reduce the danger in those locations. So yeah, it is a bit of an unusual one, that is, Sam. It's not one that comes up very often.
Yeah, no, very true. And so it is. It's a defined protective measure. It's in there. It's in 7671. There's a whole section in Chapter 4 devoted to it. But as you rightly say, there's a couple of things there that would mean we're perhaps not going to be able to use it, especially on its own. We're going to have some additional protective measures because, as you said, it's a measure really only used to provide basic protection. So if we require fault protection, as we do in most instances, then we're going to have to provide some additional measures to provide fault protection, for example under earth fault and short circuit conditions. And then, like you say, we can only use placing out of reach when the installation is under the supervision or control of skilled persons. So it's possible, I think, but it's unlikely that it will be the only protective measure.
Good question though, Sam.
Yeah, interesting one, because I think those are the ones that although we all enjoy them, because at first we think, I don't know the answer to that, and we kind of get a bit hurt and upset, but then we actually find out what the answer is, which is then that's then another bit of information in our back pocket that we use in the future. So yeah, good question. On a construction site, do all socket outlets require RCD protection? Again, another good one.
They do, yeah. I mean, if there's a documented risk assessment in place, okay, we might have exceptions, but it's hardly going to be the case on a construction site, not a regular construction site anyway. And it's worth bearing in mind why we're on to construction sites as well. Parts 1 to 6 of the regulation still also apply. So in answer to that question, Sam, yes, we do need RCD protection generally. Yeah,
no, it's good. Some people often fall into that trap of when they're looking at the special location sections, they just follow the requirements that are listed in the special location section, and you always have to bear in mind that it's not just section 70 whatever, but you also still have to comply with parts 1 to 6, and this is a good example because in section 704, which covers construction sites, it says that all circuits supplying socket outlets rated over 32 amp have to have RCD protection not exceeding 500 milliamps. So that tells us everything over 32. So if we just looked at section 704, we might think, okay, that's all I need to do. But as you said, we still need to comply with parts 1 to 6, and in chapter 41 it will tell us that all socket outlets rated below 32 amp have to have additional protection of a 30 milliamp RCD unless they've got the documented risk assessment. So yeah, it's a good one to sort of bring that back into that memory that we although we need to comply with the special location section, we still need to consider parts 1 to 6 as well.
Absolutely.
And then we've also got okay, a bit of a long one, so we'll read this one through, and then regulation 560.7.1 of 761 states that except where the recommendations of other safety standards apply, circuits for safety services shall be independent of other circuits. However, BS 5839 part 6 states that the power supply for smoke detectors can either be provided by an independent circuit at the dwelling's consumer unit or a separately electrically protected regularly used lighting circuit, so that so they can be fed from a lighting circuit. So I think the person asking the question is saying, look, there's a difference here. 7671 says that circuits for safety services should be independent, but 5839 part 6 says we can supply smoke detectors from an existing lighting circuit. So when we've got that difference of guidance, which one wins? Which one do we follow?
Well, it's a little bit of both, to be fair, Sam. I mean, generally 7671 covers our general electrical installation, but where there are other British standards or harmonised standards in place, we also need to consider those as well. Recently, with the influx of EICRs, I've noticed on electrotechnical assessments, the question's getting raised more and more often. Should smoke detectors, when they're being installed, be on a separate circuit or a more sustainable circuit, like a lighting circuit? It's down to the design of the installation, it's down to what the customer requires, but we also need to consider a little bit of best practice. And if we look at rented accommodation, sometimes it may be advantageous to put it on the lighting circuit. Then if there is an issue with the smoke detection equipment and it has to be turned off for a small period of time, the occupant is more liable to raise the situation with the landlord to get it established, if you like, and corrected to get the lighting back on, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So it's down to design it, it's down to what the customer requires.
Yeah, but
the guidance of the regulations.
Yeah, and it's a really good point again that you've made, because we get told by landlords that they've had the situation where smoke detectors have been put on their own circuit only to find that the tenant has turned that circuit off. So yeah, there are, strange as it sounds, there are actually advantages of putting it on the lighting circuit, and yeah, the regs do counter for it in that, it talks about 7671 being general requirements, but right at the front of the regs in our chapter 1 about fundamental principles, it talks about regulations that they're intended to be applied to electrical installations generally, but in certain cases they may need to be supplemented by the requirements or recommendations of other British or harmonised standards. And it gives examples, and it included in the examples of BS 5839 the fire detection and alarm regs. So it's one of those ones where that supersedes, that takes precedence over the general requirements in 7671. So yeah, we follow 5839 part 6 where it's got specific requirements over and above the requirements of 7671.
It's a really good question, Sam, because it does crop up most weeks, to be fair, especially with the guys that are undertaking EICRs predominantly on the landlord sector. So yeah, really good question.
Yeah. Okay, just following up from some of the ones yet. Apologies, some people have said, what's a holiday? I guess that was in relation to our references to holidays, so I do apologise if you've not had the benefit of that yet. And option D, yeah, I think most people actually, when I had a quick check the question of the week at lunchtime and then midway through the afternoon, and yeah, most people were getting it right, which is really good. It might mean that we've perhaps made it too easy, the question this week, but really good to see that most people are getting that right, so that's good. Okay, question that's come in through the chat is when determining IB, so design current, for a 3-pole and neutral dB supply, so 3-phase and neutral dB supply, single phase final circuits are not balanced, would you use the highest rated circuit for the design current? So if we're talking about the 3-phase circuit, then yes, you're going to have to, if it's not balanced, you're going to have to take the highest design, the highest phase or line design current, because that's what you're going to need to size the current carrying capacity of the cable, and then also make sure that you've got the right size protective device. So yeah, if you haven't got a completely balanced 3-phase system, then you're going to have to take the highest one in order in terms of using that as your IB to determine your required protective device and your required cable size for current carrying. But would you agree with that, Lee?
Yeah, 100%, Sam. It's a difficult one if we've got a 3-phase board full of single-phase loads, because the balancing can change throughout the day. So what you just said there about considering the highest load, I accept that 100%, and I would give the same advice.
Yeah.
Out on a technical assessment.
I think someone's asked about the comment that we made about the loft electrical installation being covered by thermal insulation at a later date, and how do you stop this happening? Well, obviously, you know, we can't stop it if it happens afterwards, but that's why, you know, it's always good to have those conversations with the customer. So if there's no insulation at the moment when you do the install, then you make them aware of the effect that insulation can have. So, you know, and ask them the question, are you planning to do it? So have those conversations. Ultimately, if you install it and then somebody comes along afterwards and puts it on, you can't be held responsible for that, but we would strongly recommend that you have that conversation up front, so that you're doing everything reasonably practical to ensure that there's no harmful effects later on.
100%. I think it's worth mentioning as well, Sam, accuracy of certification at this point. When we're filling out the certificate, it asks for the reference method. Ultimately, this indicates what was there at the time that you installed the cables. So if there was minimal insulation or no insulation, this is going to generate a different reference method to that of, you know, if there was 400 mil, 600 mil on the roof space. So yeah, the conversation is absolutely fantastic, but make sure folks out there doing your certification that we don't leave it blank. We don't put a uniform one in all the way down the certificate. Make sure that we select the right reference method for each individual circuit, and it should always be the most onerous one that the cables pass through. So if we've got trunking, if we've got clip direct, if we've got it running through thermal insulation, ultimately the thermal insulation, you know, usually is the one that we would record. Would you agree with that, Sam? Yeah,
absolutely. And it also, in my mind, springs another thing that, you know, when we are doing an EICR, if we notice that the installation method is clip direct, you know, it's free of thermal insulation, but then when we actually go and inspect, we see there's thermal insulation. Again, we've got to, you know, that should sort of start that subject. Oh, when was the thermal insulation installed? Do you understand that can have an effect? So yeah, again, you know, look at the installation certificate or the previous condition report that hopefully are available, and compare those against what there is now, and that can have, you know, hopefully have that conversation before you start your work or your EICR, so that you can explain that there's something has changed, or the original documentation isn't accurate. But yeah, try and have those conversations before you start.
Absolutely.
somebody said, because what can you do to stop it happening? Someone said a good clay pot with a breathing hole. Not always, although I completely understand it's often a good practical solution, but yeah, not always. When filling out certificates and needing to know what the main service fuse type and rating is, this one is, this has got to be in the top 10 of questions that we get to the helpline. If you're a registered contractor with us, either through the NIC or through Alexa, we actually covered this in the most recent copy of Connections, about, it started off with, can I pull the service fuse, and went up through all the associated questions of, well, what do I do to get its rating? Because the bottom line is, no, we don't have the authority in general to pull the service fuse. I appreciate round the country there is a relationship with some of the distribution network operators. I believe it's SSE and some of the others. I think Western Power and UK Power Networks, there are courses which you can go to, but one of the things which is frustrating to a lot of people is it's not common throughout the country. Each of the DNOs manage and control their area differently and under their rules, so some DNOs will not allow us under any circumstances to have direct access to the service fuse. So it's a difficult one, but please remember that as part of the DNO's regulations, the electricity supply and quality regulations, they have to provide that response in writing to a reasonable request. So if we can email or get a request to them to ask them for their rating of the protective device, they have to provide it under their rules and regulations, and so if it's not forthcoming, we can then make that known to the Energy Network Authority, which are like the body that look after all the DNOs. So that's the way to do it. Do it formally. Obviously, if there is previous installation certificates or condition reports which you can rely on, then you can use them and just record that you got it through inquiry. But otherwise, go directly to the DNO and ask the question formally. So document your request, perhaps in an email. And if you look at the, if you look in the details in, I think it's in Appendix 1, where it covers the British standards and those that are statutory and those that are not, there's some guidance in there that tells you which part of their regulations, because they have to supply us with, a fair bit of information, including prospective fault currents and earth loop impedances. So, but yeah, the fuse rating is one of the things that they have to supply. So very frustrating. We are always, all the time that I've been here, we've been in negotiation with the ENA to improve this situation, but yeah, we're not fully there yet. But as I say, I'm aware that SSE allow NIC EIC registered contractors to have access, and they provide them with seals and sealing pliers so that they can reseal the head after they've opened it up to review the fuse rating. What's it like in your area, Leah?
Yeah, our DNO up in the northeast, Northern Power Grid, they won't hear of it, unfortunately. If you need to isolate the tails, if it's a planned distribution board change or a planned rewire, what we should be doing is saying to the client, can you apply to your energy provider for a main switch? What I'm seeing a lot of is where smart meters are being installed or main switches are being installed for this purpose. The personnel are actually putting a white label on the front of the fuse indicating the type of fuse that's inside the carrier. So where on the side of the carrier it might declare that it's 100 amp, that's actually what the carrier can actually handle. It doesn't necessarily reflect what's in the carrier. And I think on 90% of installations where there's been a new meter fitted, there is a white label I've noticed, and that in my area, the northeast, giving that extra little bit of information. I'm not sure what it's like over the country, Sam, but certainly up here.
Yeah. Yeah, no, and that is one of the frustrating things.
It's a small bit of information that's trying to help us out, really.
Yeah, and it's important, you know, especially when we're doing additions and alterations to an existing installation, because we've got to confirm that the existing installation's got spare capacity. So yeah, exactly. You know, it's a key bit of information. Plus, you know, we might be looking at you know, typical domestic, and it's got 16 mil tails rather than 25 mil tails. We've done our calculation to think about the load, but yeah, it's also very, very useful to know the rating of that cutout fuse.
Yeah.
Okay. I have a metallic porter cabin on a PME system. It's contended via, I'm guessing that's connected via a 16 amp commando socket outlet. Would it be advisable to disconnect the cabin from the PME earth and provide a spike TT like a caravan situation? Okay, very, very common question again. You know, we get a lot of porter cabins that are for temporary facilities on site. If it is connected to the PME supply, one thing that we'd look at is, have I also got access to true earth? So, you know, can I stand on the ground, on the physical earth or grass, and touch the metal of that porter cabin system which is connected to the PME system? Because if I can, I'm then going to be the conductor between those two possible potential differences. Now, may not be a harmful potential difference, but will quite often be susceptible. So even if people aren't getting you know, harmful or God forbid lethal electric shocks, they're feeling that voltage difference, perhaps even if it's only, you know, 5 or 10 volts difference. And so you'll get a lot of phone calls saying that I'm getting electric shocks.
Uncomfortable.
Yeah, and so I think we offer the advice, if you can, if you physically or the users of that installation can become the conductor between those two different potentials, then it's a strong consideration to turn it to a TT location. So use the PME to protect the cable going out, but then divorce it when it gets to the porter cabin, so that you've got no differences. You've also got to think about, have I got extraneous conductive parts in that porter cabin, because they're going to need bonding, and the minimum would be 10 mil. And so if we're looking at a 16 amp supply, the 10 mil earth is probably going to be larger than the line conductor, so you're not going to be able to use the conductors in the supply cable. So again, that's another consideration that you might decide, okay, well, I'll TT it, and then I only need to bond to my local TT. So yeah, there's nothing that says you have to divorce it, but those are the things to consider about the fact of simultaneous access to true earth, bonding requirements within it, and also the distance as well, because the further we go, perhaps we could exaggerate that potential difference between true earth and PME earth. Would you add anything to that about PME and porter cabins?
No, I mean, it's a really good answer. I think you've covered the basis of most situations there, Sam. I think the only thing that springs to my mind is the loss of the pen conductor situation, and you know, the raised potential, not necessarily line voltage, but the raised voltage exposed on that porter cabin.
Yeah.
That's the only other thing I could possibly comment on.
Okay. We've got another good common one. So if we do a TT system with an earth spike, all the circuits are RCBO modules, so I'm assuming that's all the outgoing circuits. Do I need to change the main switch for a 100 milliamp RCD? And the answer is no. There is a regulation in 7671 which confirms that so long as my incoming tails are double insulated and I maintain that double insulation till it enters the board, then I can rely on double insulation for protection of the tails, so I don't need an upfront RCD to protect the tails. And then providing considerations given to the internal connecting cables, so only use the manufacturer's equipment when it comes to that, and make sure that there's no possibility of single insulated conductors suffering abrasion. Then there's no requirement for a 100 milliamp main switch, because all that would be protecting would be the internal cables between the main switch and the outgoing RCBOs. So long as they're manufacturer's equipment, correctly installed with air guidance, and there's no obvious means that they can be damaged or abrased, then there's no requirement for that second internal RCD as a main switch. Anything else you'd add to that?
No, I mean, absolutely spot on once again, Sam. Obviously refer to manufacturer's instructions. I am aware that there's certain boards out there where they do sort of pass the onus onto the contractor at the end of the day, what earthing system are you connecting it to, and they do offer some guidance saying that maybe, if the internal wiring is single insulated, we would recommend you install this. But it does come down to the earthing system, and the gentleman who sent this in was referring to TT. So yeah, manufacturer's instructions.
Okay.
For me.
Hi, if replacing smoke alarms fed from a lighting circuit that's not RCD protected, should this circuit be now be put on RCD to make work done compliant? So if we're adding the smoke detectors onto an existing lighting circuit, which is I'm guessing the read of that, so I'm just going to read it one more time. If replacing smoke alarm fed from lighting circuit that's not RCD, so we're not actually adding, we're replacing them, but the lighting circuit's not RCD protected. So I guess this is aimed at the change in the 18th, which now requires us to RCD protect domestic lighting circuits. So because we haven't installed any new parts to the lighting circuit, we've got no new parts to the lighting circuit to RCD protect. So no, we wouldn't have to provide RCD protection. It would be a recommendation to the homeowner to add that to get the enhanced protection of an RCD, but it wouldn't be a requirement if we weren't installing a new lighting circuit or making additions, because then the additions would need RCD protection.
Absolutely, yeah, 100%.
Yeah. Someone's mentioned about the TT installation. I do have to say that there are some notes in the IET's on-site guide which recommends about the RCD main switch. It's one of those situations where we don't actually agree with it being a requirement. If you look at the reg concerning the protection for internal conductors within an enclosure when we've got a TT supply, it says consideration, it talks about using manufacturer's equipment, so we shouldn't be making up our own link cables, but not actually a requirement. So yeah, our general advice is slightly different to the IET's on-site guide in that respect. Okay, so a lot of people helping each other out, which is great to see, as always. So looking at AFDDs next year being implemented on circuits up to 32 amp, this will be an amendment, or will it lead to new 19th edition? Also, why has this been approved considering the cost of devices? Is it safety? Okay, so this is it's a good example of where we're actually waiting for confirmation on what's going to be in the 18th edition Amendment 2. Myself and Lee were just talking about timescales before we started tonight, and the existing planned timescale for publication of Amendment 2 is next year. I believe it's April next year, so it's not too far away now. We're sort of looking at about 6 months away. Now we're still not 100% sure, it's not been confirmed what's actually going to be included in that. We know through the DPC process, so all of the proposed changes were documented for public comment, and I think AFDD's was just about had the most comments from members of the public and industry bodies like ourselves. So I would just say we've really got to hold back on commenting on what's there yet till we get it confirmed what it is. The original proposal in the DPC was to implement a requirement. So at the moment, the 18th edition and up to Amendment 1, which is not really affected by FDD. So at the moment, it is only a recommendation. But there was a strong proposal in the original document for public comment to increase and use it in certain circuits. If I remember rightly, it was circuits containing socket outlets. But there was quite a strong opposition against that and minimising it because it didn't really reflect the type of installations which were given as examples in the 18th. So yeah, as soon as we've got confirmation, we'd be able to answer that question about what is it going to be. Right now, it is just a bit conjecture. We're still waiting to see. Okay, as a job in Spark and running a training centre, I find the system whereby Sparks can't pull a main fuse a complete joke. The industry needs to sort this issue out, and if that requires a specific course for contractors to undertake quality with them to pull a fuse so that they can undertake electrical work safely, then so be it. Look at the training that meet them. Okay, these are not my words, I have to say. No, although the engineer has said no offence taken, undertake, and that which qualified Sparkies undertake. Okay, so learning note for me, I maybe have to read the questions before I read them out loud, but that's me. But yeah, I mean, please don't get us wrong. We are as frustrated as you, and it is, it's one of our top 10 things that we want to happen in the industry because it's been going on for way too long. Unfortunately, we just don't have the authority that a lot of people feel we have. We can't do it. And most homeowners, building owners, don't have that authority. They don't realise that the box, they own the box, and they've got actually, as part of the contract with the DNO and their energy provider, they have to maintain that box, but they're not allowed to put things in it. They're not allowed to pull the fuse because that belongs to the distribution network operator. So it really is a heavy contractual thing. And we would love to be able to say, look, what do you want us to do? We're aware, that it may need people to go on training courses, to have additional PPE, because you have got the risk of arc flash, etc. So it might warrant you having to have additional PPE equipment. But we would love to get to the situation where
insurance side as well, Sam, to consider as well. Yeah,
absolutely, and then you're going to have to reseal the head, and you're going to have to document that, and so you're going to have a way that people know that it was you that resealed it, etc. So yeah, it's a little bit more. It's a little bit larger than some people see, and please take my word for it. It's something that we've been negotiating on for years and years and years. I admit we haven't got very far, but that's not for the not because we've not put in the effort in. Yeah, well, that's it. That was the phrase I was looking for. Okay, we've run out of time, so we'll take a couple more. Let's have a look. PME to outbuilding with no extraneous parts. So a lot of people saying it's not a good idea to export PME. The problem is we have to sort of give the answer. What do you have to do? There's nothing in 7671 that says you can't. But yeah, we should really always think about how are we going to then create simultaneous access between True Earth and PME Earth? Not a good idea. Consideration given to extraneous conductive parts that need bonding, because the bonding requirements quite often will be larger than the supply requirements, and so you won't be able to use your supply cable to bring that bond back. And think about distances as well, because that can actually then have further exacerbate that potential difference, and also consideration, as Lee said, to broken neutrals will then give that, but that's a situation wherever we've got PME.
Can I just add to that, Sam, if you don't mind? There was a really good presentation on the wire the other week, and it will still be there regarding that exact topic. Although if you watch it on a Wednesday night, it's live, so you can add your questions and the polls are there. If you watch it after the event, obviously you can't. But I think, how long are the presentations there for, Sam? Is it 2 or 3 weeks?
Yeah, they'll stay there for roughly a year, so they'll be available to view on demand for a year, and that's really just sort of like a storage issue. So we take them down after a year. Quite often as well, by that time, things have changed, so they need updating points. They can't stay there forever anyway. But yeah, typically we try and once they're hosted on a Wednesday night, it takes us a few days to actually get them up for people to view them on demand, and then they'll be available on demand for a year.
If people watch them, it counts towards CPD as well, which is one of our new requirements.
Yeah, it does. So that's one of the requirements that's come in as part of the electrotechnical assessment specification. So the wire webinars are CPD accredited, and also the articles within the Connections magazine are CPD accredited as well. Okay, so we'll finish again tonight. So another common question that we get into the technical helpline, where a C2 classification code has been attributed to an observation, how long is deemed acceptable to carry out the remedial actions to make the installation satisfactory? So how long have people got after a C2 an unsatisfactory outcome on a condition report?
Yeah, it's certainly not open-ended. We're going to restrict this to 28 days in England. There's different requirements for Scotland, Ireland and Wales, but we're going to say that 28 days is a reasonable amount of time to address any C2s.
Yeah.
We can't just note them down and just leave it open-ended, hoping that somebody's going to put it right. There's a document there indicating that this, a responsible person should complete this work in 28 days.
Yeah, absolutely. So 7671 never actually specified a time. There's no time in there, but it does say that C2s should be dealt with as a matter of urgency by a skilled and competent person. So it kind of puts some emphasis on sooner rather than later. The 28 days came about when the electrical safety requirements in the private rented sector were introduced last year, and 28 days was given. That's after the landlords received that confirmation of an unsatisfactory outcome, that there should be 28 days to do the required remedial action. If practical, there are some reasons why it might not happen, but they're dealt with separately. So 28 days has been adopted. So yeah, as you said, although PRS is currently only for legislation within England, it's accepted that that's a good rule of thumb to work to. Okay. Thank you very much for everyone's attendance. I apologise if we didn't get through your question, but we will. We trawl through them at the end to see if those the ones that were missed, we can pick those up at the start of the next session. I do just want to tell you about some other things that we've got coming up. So we've now started to, after our mid-year break, publicise the wire presentations that are coming up. So in September we've got the first part of a webinar associated with protection against fire, That's part 1. Part 2 then comes at the end of October, and nicely sandwiched in between is a session on the NICIC online certification. So that's a session entitled Online Certification Masterclass. So please, you can register for those events now. So if those are of interest, please get your registration for those events through the website. They'll be on Wednesday evenings at 8 o'clock. We're trying to do webinars every other Wednesday, and these Monday night Q&A sessions every other Monday alternatively. So each week should either have a wire webinar or a Monday Q&A. So as I say, thanks very much for all those people that contributed tonight and took part. Thanks very much for the questions. Apologies if we didn't get round to your question, but we will get round to it again. I hope you found it useful. Please do keep telling us about subjects that you'd like us to cover in future events, because we do listen, and we'd like to be able to help out. And any final thoughts from you, Lee? Again, it always goes, it's the quickest half hour of my week. It really is. Absolutely flown this evening, Sam. Really enjoyed it once again, so thank you for having me. Yeah. Some really good questions there, and like Sam says, keep them coming in. You're more than welcome to ring the technical support helpline in the meantime, and your local area engineer, fire your questions to those guys when they're out there. I know I certainly get them when I'm doing my audits. Yeah, absolutely. No, it keeps us, and we've all got that inquisitive gene. Even if we don't know the answer immediately, after we get over being a bit bent out of shape, we actually enjoy the research and the finding the answer, and then benefit from knowing it next time round. Yeah, and it's worth mentioning, never be embarrassed to ask a question, even if it's a really, really simple one. Some guys feel slightly embarrassed to ask questions on their assessments in case we make a judgment against them. Don't. If you've got a question and you feel it's really, really basic and you feel you should know, ask. Yeah, we'll always help and guide the best we can. Absolutely. Golden rules are that there's no such thing as a stupid question, only stupid answers. And that nobody knows it all. If you ever meet an electrician that says he knows it all, I'd have a few doubts, because our industry's too wide. We've all worked in certain sectors, but I've 100%. Never met anybody that's worked across it all and would actually claim to know it all. So yeah, it's a great industry to be in that respect, in that there's always something to learn. Okay, well, thanks very much, and hopefully we'll see you again over the next few weeks. Thank you. Okay, thank you very much.